guess I'd pull it right back and make it about character.
Well, welcome to Before the Weekend, your go-to real estate podcast where we cut through the noise and deliver what truly matters. I'm Kasey McDonald, and with me today is my co-host, Peter Schravemade. How are we today, Pete?
Yeah, good. What noise are we cutting through today, Kasey?
Oh, well, actually, we are going to start with a bit of a cracker today, I think. This morning, we've got a big one.
Doesn't sound like us on a Friday.
No. I think everyone may have seen what's been lighting up on social media, especially in the Queensland real estate industry this week. And
yeah, well, maybe those south of the border, the Mexicans, the New South Wales and Victorians and Adelaideans, maybe they haven't seen it. For the rest of the state, there's been a bit of a debacle, hasn't there, Kasey?
Look, there absolutely has been, and I think it really relates to the transition that the REIQ have made to go into a new platform for Realworks. So they've transitioned from Forms Live, Dynamic Methods product, and they've moved to a new platform for Realworks. So I know that you've also been chatting to Antonia, Pete, so maybe we could dive into what you know about what's actually happening here.
Yeah, well, I think this is one of those stories where on the surface, it looks like there's a software issue. So, if you're a Queensland real estate agent today, or actually, let's go back to the 30th of June, you would have woken up to a bit of a drama because you've logged into Realworks and either your templates and forms are there or they're not there. Or, it's a different operating system to start off with. So you've got a few dramas happening. A lot of Queenslanders that I've spoken to are like, what the heck has happened? This is a software issue. Why would the REIQ do this? And, all of that. And I think that kind of undersells the problem here. And to frame it, I think we need to go back. But I'll talk about the forms because I think, the thing is the forms aren't a software in an agency. They're not just software. They are encased in software now because we've moved away from filing cabinets. We've moved away from that. But they're effectively, the forms are actually part of the operating system of all real estate businesses across Australia. And agents and property managers rely on these platforms for contracts, appointment forms, tenancy agreements, breach notices, entry notices, the templates for other extraneous things, signing workflows, and obviously compliance is part of it. So when something major happens to that infrastructure, that software infrastructure, it definitely makes it more difficult. And the simple version of what's going on at the moment is that the Real Estate Institute of Queensland and other real estate institutes have had a long-standing relationship with Dynamic Methods, whose platform Forms Live powers Realworks. Now, in other states, that's called something else. The REI NSW still has a relationship with Dynamic Methods and it powers their forms. RESA has moved away, but they did have a relationship with Dynamic Methods. As far as I know, the only two states who are still left are REWA in Western Australia and the Real Estate Institute of New South Wales. They're the ones that have a relationship with Dynamic Methods. But that relationship here in Queensland has ended. And I believe Queensland is the largest portion of the forms platform for Dynamic Methods. So in the past, Dynamic Methods have said we're the biggest forms provider in Australia. Now I think other forms providers could probably question as to whether they are or not because it's a big deal for Dynamic Methods. They've had this taken off them. Now, Dynamic Methods has come out. So we're in the middle of a transfer where it's going from Dynamic Methods to another company. And Dynamic Methods have decided that they're not going to go out quietly, as is, I suppose they're right, as a PropTech. They have launched their Forms Live independently in Queensland with new Queensland forms, which it says are prepared by a new legal firm. So the Queensland agents and property managers now have a very live issue in front of them. Which platform are they using? Which forms are they using? Where is the data that has come before this? And what does that mean for their day-to-day compliance?
And so, Pete, obviously this just hasn't come out of nowhere though, right? I mean, making a big decision like this just doesn't happen overnight. So is there some history here?
Yeah. Yes. No, it hasn't come overnight. And it's actually a really good question, Kasey, because the background goes back to late 2023 and early 2024. And what happened is the real estate REA group which is realestate.com.au, PropTrack, and a bunch of others. Realtair is part of that. They proposed acquiring Dynamic Methods. Well, they didn't just propose. I believe they entered a contract. I think so. That proposed contract or acquisition didn't proceed. But before it fell over, the ACCC had commenced a review and released a statement of issues. Now, that statement of issues was not a final decision.
I remember seeing that. Yep.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that was a big statement of issues because it was basically the regulator setting out preliminary concerns and asking questions. And the concerns were pretty relevant. The ACCC was looking at whether the largest digital real estate advertising business acquiring the largest digital real estate forms provider would create competition issues. That's what they were asking. And so the regulator was basically saying, what happens if a company that controls the dominant portal also gains control of one of the most important parts of the real estate workflow, being the form system? So the ACCC raised issues in foreclosure, issues around foreclosure of competitors, data-related risks, access to commercially sensitive information, and whether the control over the forms infrastructure could reinforce REA's already strong position, thus ending some kind of competition. So the acquisition didn't happen. REA pulled out after that statement was released. I'm not saying that they're related, but it just happened that they pulled out afterwards. But the concerns of the ACCC actually suggest to us that the digital forms is not a side issue anymore. They're actually part of a greater critical industry infrastructure.
Yeah, I definitely remember seeing the articles certainly coming out in relation to that. But I guess it kind of leans into my next question, though. You know, did the REIQ need to transition away from dynamic methods?
That's also a very good question. I think in my view, once it became apparent that the incumbent forms provider, being Dynamic Methods Forms Live, once they were the subject of a proposed acquisition by the REA Group, I actually think the REIQ had to seriously consider the future of that relationship. But I'm not saying we know every commercial factor. We don't know what was going on. I haven't seen the contract. I haven't seen the board papers. I don't know what the discussions were behind closed doors. But if you're the peak body and you're responsible for forms that your members rely on every day, you can't ignore the governance implication that an acquisition like that would have caused. So
Absolutely.
If I was a member, I would have asked, why is our forms infrastructure sitting inside a system that's owned by the dominant portal? Knowing how much that, most real estate agents already pay to the REA Group, why do they now have our forms? What does that mean for our data? Do they have visibility of things like who the listing form is signed, the point of listing? Do they have the information that contains, contract value, who the contractees are or the people that are party to the contract? What does that mean for agency choice? What does that mean for integrations, and what does that mean for competition? What does it mean for the independence of the forms that we rely on? So it is completely understandable, in my opinion, that the REIQ would want to bring that forms platform back into an industry-owned environment. Now, having said that, that doesn't mean that the rollout of what they've just done has been perfect. It clearly has not been seamless. But the strategic reason for wanting control of the forms infrastructure is not hard to understand and very, very hard to ignore. Like, you can say what you want about what's going on at the moment, but this move could actually save the future of real estate agents and property professionals in this state. So I don't think I'm understating that, right?
No, and I agree. And I think it just comes back to the questions, I think, that you kind of asked as a part of that, as to what does it mean for our data, what the agency of choice. More importantly, if REA was to acquire it, what would all of that mean? So I think it kind of is relatable, and no doubt possibly some of the same questions that the REIQ as our industry body were also asking, and also questioning, maybe is that what the ACCC was also suggesting, right?
And I'd go as far to suggest other REIs have also made the decision to step away from dynamic methods in the wake of that. So from a dynamic methods perspective, it really hasn't been a wonderful move. There was an acquisition happening, and I've heard some of the values of what that acquisition was. It wasn't a small one, and at the end of that, their clients, the consumers for dynamic methods, which is the various REIs, I think, except for Victoria, have all made a decision to peel away one at a time, leaving only New South Wales and Western Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, look, and obviously you mentioned that, of course, it clearly hasn't been seamless. We're certainly seeing social media, many comments from many people in regards to this. And, of course, timing, I think, has been one of those biggest complaints that I've seen. Like, why now? Why this timing when we've got AML coming in? So, what's your kind of thoughts on that?
Yeah, the timing's atrocious. It's terrible. And but Antonia Mercarella has come out and publicly acknowledged that she did it in her update on the 30th of June to Facebook. She basically stated this is dreadful timing. We've got end of financial year. Let's start with that. Most property managers and principals are already neck deep in that. We've got AML CTF hitting on pretty much that exact date. She publicly apologised. She said the date was driven by the end of the contract with the former provider, Dynamic Methods. And she also said, the contractual constraints also meant that the REIQ was effectively gagged or couldn't start publicly communicating the transition until June 1. So that was in a post. So the REIQ's public position is that the timing was completely driven by the expiry of the previous contract. Now, I don't know, like in defence to Dynamic Methods. And by the way, before we even start this, I've asked the head of growth at Dynamic Methods for comment, and it's been a no comment ongoing. We've done that twice now. So it's been a no comment. We've asked them for comment. They haven't commented. And to be fair, the REIQ are also staying tight-lipped about this other than what they've released to the public. But the REIQ's public position is that the timing was driven by the expiry of the previous contract. Now, we don't know whether whether an extension was requested, whether an extension was available, whether it was refused, or whether other transition arrangements could have been negotiated. We just don't know that because we've not seen the underlying commercial agreement, and neither party is talking about it at the moment. So I would say that the timing was probably nobody's fault. I would say that the public explanation is that the contract ended on the 30th of June and the REIQ says it was constrained in what they could communicate before June 1, which also answers a lot of people in the industry about why did we not know earlier they're being constrained. I don't know any more than that, but they're saying they're being constrained. That should give the industry some context, but unfortunately that's not going to remove any kind of practical pain for any of the real estate agencies or property managers out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've certainly been seeing those comments as well, just around, historical forms, templates. We've got obviously some of the integrations are still not linking. People aren't able to get in and certainly get old entry condition reports, just as one example from the property management space. So what's your feedback, or what do you understand about why potentially those forms aren't appearing right now?
Yeah, I think that's a big operational question. Neither side is actually pointing fingers at this stage, which, means that we shouldn't be either.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, again, we have to stick to what's been said publicly. In the launch day update, Antonia said the REIQ had worked to ensure saved forms, completed forms, finalised forms, templates, PDF and photographs would be available online in the new Realworks platform on launch day. So it's quite clear to me that the REIQ expected them to be there on that day. Now, I don't know what's happened, whether that is the incoming software providers or the outgoings, or it's something else in between. And I'm not speculating on any of that, but clearly that has not happened. Antonia's admitted that hasn't happened. So she's also said that the REIQ does, and this is really important for you guys who are losing your mind out there. She said that the REIQ does have access to those materials and expects to return access to the users within around 2 weeks. But she has said urgent matters can be handled on a case-by-case basis. So, if you've got a QCAT issue coming up, you've got an appointment date, you need information from there. It's very important not to, stuff around the magistrate or anyone involved in that. I would be calling the REIQ and making them aware of that. They seem to have access to that. But with regards to what actually exactly did happen, we don't know. It could be migration, could be timing, could be a technical issue. It could be connected to the change in tech provider. But unless one of the parties actually comes out and explains that to us publicly, I'm probably not going to speculate on that. What we can say is for agencies, especially property management businesses, those documents aren't just archives, they're actually operational tools. And I feel the REIQ is very aware of this and the
Mhm.
inconvenience. Templates, notices, historical documents, save forms are all part of the way that businesses manage risk, consistency, speed, and compliance. So, it's important. And I feel, I can actually feel the frustration of the property managers coming through the social media channels at me.
Mhm.
Not at me, not directed at me,
Yeah.
but I can feel it. I saw an open letter written by a property manager, part of which is clearly uninformed. She doesn't understand the contractual
Mhm.
deadline or any of that. But she's venting because her business is hurting. She's
Yeah.
probably hurting. So I
Yeah.
feel that pain, and I think the REIQ does as well.
Yeah, and look, I think, Antonia and the REIQ have definitely been open in their public statements to say that they have the support line there and they're wanting to do what they can to support businesses. And I also probably appreciate that that line's probably full and there's lots of people calling in as well.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
understandably, operationally, and just practicality wise, it is really impacting because I'm feeling the pain, having been a past
yeah,
property manager as well, as to
yeah.
understanding sometimes the urgency of that. But back, you just made a point, Pete, about an
Well,
open letter.
yeah, and
So
with
can we
regards
dive
to
into
that,
that?
with regards to that open letter, let's not mention who it's from
Sure.
or
Yeah,
the
I
company
think
that's
that's
there.
fair.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I did see an open letter addressed to the REIQ and actually Property Me. I'm
Hmm.
not entirely sure. Maybe it's the integration with Property Me. It's pretty direct, but this property manager is raising concerns about missing templates, forms not synchronizing properly, missing RTA forms, slow loading and access errors. I've heard about this, and
Hmm.
I believe Antonia addressed that to an extent, but forms generating with missing information, legislative notices failing to populate required tenancy information, and administrative workload increasing. Now, the claims were in an open letter, and
Hmm.
we're reporting that those claims are being made, but we're not making a finding about who caused the problems, and we're definitely not saying who it sits with, whether that's REIQ, the new platform, Property Me, integration, migration, or something else. But her broader point's important. She's not just saying that it's inconvenience. She's actually raised, and this is probably the only
Hmm.
thing I agree with in that open letter, is that it is a compliance risk, and that I think is the part that I draw the industry's focus on. If a property manager issues an entry notice, a breach notice, a rent arrears notice, or a tenancy document, and the document's wrong, that property manager is the one that has to explain it to the tenant, the landlord, who they have the fiduciary interest to, the principal, the regulator, or the tribunal. Now, the tenant's not going to care about the integration.
Hmm.
The landlord's not going to care about or blame the ATI, and the tribunal is not necessarily going to care that on a June 30 a template didn't populate correctly. So, that agency carries the practical risk, and that's probably the issue.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that. And I think more broadly looking at that, it's probably the key here. So I guess in
Mm.
understanding that, my next question to you, Pete, is what, from our view and certainly your opinion, what do we think agents and principals should be doing right now?
Yeah, I think they need to look at two separate things. So the first one is, does the software work for my business? And they're looking at that now. I think most
Hmm.
people are looking at, this is the first time Realworks was working on June 29. It's not working now on June 30. Does the software work for my business? I think, I'm not telling agents what to do, but I think you're contracted to Realworks. I believe. I think there's ongoing contracts. I think you should probably be a bit patient to see if that works out.
Hmm.
I suspect it is. It is going to. I don't believe this is brought across in a manner that hadn't been thought through, despite the mess that is emerging. The second question, this is probably the greater question that I'd throw at agencies and principals, because like I've seen a couple in the last few days. What legal documents am I actually using?
Hmm.
Now, those are related, but they're not the same question. You don't select a forms provider based on software. That is not your primary concern. I believe you should make a selection and forget the forms provider, the software. You need to make a selection of the forms that you are using based on the way that they execute for you. So forms are a tool, but if you're using a form that is viewed by a tribunal to not be correct, or if you're using a contract that doesn't stick, that's a problem. Like that is a big problem for you. And so first question is, what software am I selecting for my business? The second one is, what legal documents am I actually using? And so I think I'll draw from Antonia's public address on the REIQ social page. The REIQ forms are the indisputable champion in the industry. They've been developed over decades. They have an amazing relationship with the Queensland Law Society. They're familiar to the profession. They've been trialed and tested through real world use in courts. Now, that doesn't mean that any other alternative is automatically wrong, but it certainly means that it doesn't mean that another forms providers are invalid, but it does mean that agencies and principals, if they're going to change from, let's say, the REIQ forms that we know are road tested, court tested, and have stood the test of time and continued, like there was only an update yesterday. So anyone not using the REIQ forms provider won't have that update already. They're already out of date. Those forms have already changed. It means that if you're an agency principal, you need to be very, very careful if you're changing forms pathways. It means if you're moving from one provider to another, don't just ask what the platform looks like, whether it's familiar, whether the subscription is cheaper. Those are all important questions, but they need to be asking who drafted these forms, who endorsed them, have they been accepted by lawyers, conveyancers, lenders involved in transactions? Are they court tested? What happens if a practitioner that we've sent it through to questions the form? What written assurances do I have? Have I received independent legal advice before relying on them? And to be really specific, I'm going to state that's not an attack on any provider. That's just prudent business. If you are a real estate agent in this state, you really need to investigate that fact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it actually does draw as well to some of those questions and complaints we are seeing through the social platforms, where a lot are saying that they have made the change. And again, that's totally fine to do so. But now they've have realised, now I've lost all of those additional special terms for the tenancy agreement that the REIQ through Realworks provided to us that we know are tested in a tribunal. Now we don't have those. So now what do we use? And that's some of the questions that are coming out through some of those channels. So I think it's actually a great point to make, is that you need to be asking those additional questions. Look, change is hard, and a lot of change all at the same time obviously makes this, even more impactful and more challenging in our businesses. But I think we just need to take a little bit of a step back here and understand, are we making those right choices for the future state of our business, not just for what we need to get done today, right?
Yeah. I believe so. Yeah. I think that's super important.
And, look, I've certainly heard and have also had some calls as well, just that they're seeing, many people are seeing some reports floating around that potentially do have some issues in them, that maybe there are some things missing. So have you heard about anything on that side?
Yeah, and I have to be really careful with this. I think we've heard private concerns in the industry. There have been private concerns raised, but unless those concerns are put on record or supported by legal advice or responded to by relevant parties, I'm not kind of comfortable airing that, what the concerns are in public. And I'm not going to say that a form is invalid. I'm not going to say that a contract is defective. What I will say is Queensland agents now appear to have more than one forms pathway being marketed to them. And that means that principals need to obtain proper independent legal advice before deciding which documents their agency will rely on. That's my practical and safe advice. Changing software is one thing. Changing the underlying legal documents used by your agency is another. So please, 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 before you sign a contract or any form around any of this software, investigate the forms and the documents that are there. Get legal advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally agree there. But I think as well, what we've seen out of this is that it's a bigger, broader industry issue not just, I guess, an REIQ versus a dynamic methods kind of play here, right? It's
Yeah.
actually a bigger story.
Yep. Yeah, and that's the real story. It's not just
Yeah.
REIQ versus dynamic
Correct.
methods. It's not Realworks versus Formals Live. The biggest story, I think, is the real estate industry has become so dependent on technology infrastructure that agencies don't control. Like, a lot of people are calling me up going, "What do we do?" And I'm like, "Do you have a PDF contract in play?" And a lot of them didn't have it. So, that stuns me because you can still download that off the platforms that they're there. You can still get that, and you can take the software out of the play, use the contract that works, and you can fill that out manually. So, if you're in the scenario where you don't know what to do, and again, I don't think it's the completion of the contract or the form that's the issue. It's the software that has enabled speed and process. I spoke to one property management company yesterday that had actually written APIs to work with Realworks, that every single bit of information that was needed would be quizzed from a landlord and spat into that platform, which would then generate the tenancy agreement or the Form 6 that they would sign. And then that would generate, there were all these forms that one would come after the other, eventually leading to a contract. And so I think the biggest story is that the real estate industry has become so dependent on technology that agencies don't control. And for years, agencies have been encouraged to digitize, automate. I've been part of that, integrate.
Mm-hmm.
I've been telling everyone, do it online, move everything into platforms. It delivers huge efficiencies. We're actually seeing what happens when those efficiencies are taken away, but it has created a dependency. Where are your documents stored? Can you export them?
Mm-hmm.
Can you access your templates? What happens if your provider changes? What happens if an integration breaks? What happens if your statutory notice does not populate correctly? What happens if a contract platform changes on the same day as end of financial year? What happens if a business relationship between two providers end? These are no longer theoretical questions. We can see them playing out live,
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the key as well with all of this is that it's happening at the same time as AML and other compliance pressures are landing in our industry.
Mm, exactly. The irony,
Mm.
we've been preparing for AML CTF all the way along. And thank God we did that. Can you imagine the mess now? But agents and property managers are now being asked to carry more compliance responsibility than ever. And AML's coming in. Privacy obligations are increasing. Cybersecurity expectations are increasing. I was only talking to Peter Lynch from Aon about that yesterday. AI is entering the workflow. Consumer scrutiny is increasing. And at the same time, some Queensland agencies are saying, the very system that they rely on for forms
Mm-hmm.
and statutory notices become harder to use during the transition. And that's probably why this story matters so much. It's not about inconvenience. It's not about operational resilience. Forms are critical to infrastructure. Transitioning involving forms kind of needs to be treated like critical infrastructure changes. And that means proper testing, proper migration, planning, clear communication, exportability, data portability, support capacity, contingency planning, and realistic timelines. So, and I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that the REIQ hasn't done that.
Mm-hmm.
I believe they have planned for this as best they can. I think it's been quite obvious that this has been coming for a while, but it's still caught people napping. And I suspect that's had to do with the constraints around their ability to talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look, and I know we all went through COVID in 2020. And if I kind of go back to the piece around the dependency on digital, remembering back then, we were heading into the offices and we were printing, and we probably, whilst evolving into digital, we probably weren't as dependent on it, right? COVID then also supported that shift. And now we've all gone full digital, and then we haven't got the capabilities to do the printing or exporting those documents because we've totally removed away from that. So I think, my last question probably for you before we move on to our next few topics of the morning is what's the fairest way that we can sum up this matter today?
Well, totally understandable that the REIQ would want control of its forms infrastructure, particularly after the ACCC raised concerns about what could happen if dynamic methods sold to anyone, but particularly the REA group. It's also understandable if agencies are frustrated. Historical forms, templates, workflows not available on day one. Those two things can be true. Like a strategic decision can be justified, and the execution can still be very painful. Look, there's a couple of things. We shouldn't make legal findings we're not qualified to make. We shouldn't speculate about contracts we haven't seen. We shouldn't repeat off-record allegations as fact, but we can absolutely say how this has exposed important forms infrastructure to the day, is to the day-to-day running of a business. And for the principals out there, my message to you is simple. Don't just ask whether the software works. Ask whether your forms, templates, historical documents, integrations, compliance workflows are safe, accessible, and have been properly advised upon. Because if your business relies on those systems, they're not just admin tools. That's actually part of your risk framework. And I think we can probably leave it there and move on to our next story. Do you reckon, Kasey?
Yes.
I hope there's something of value in there to the average agent, property manager, and principal. And like, I would urge a bit of patience through the process, especially for those on Realworks. Like, I'm hoping, just like the REIQ, that this resolves itself, in the coming days. But also, the other thing I would say is, if you're a member of the REIQ and a user of Realworks, pay attention to the social media messages that Antonia Mercarella is sending out there, because she has never, in the history of me knowing this woman, she has never been backwards in coming forward, acknowledging fault when it's their fault, and being forthright and upfront with the users that are there. And I know that a lot of people listening to the podcast will know exactly what I'm talking about. She has fallen on her sword when she needs to. And at the moment, I am sitting here saying to you, I think your best bet is to hold out if you're still an Realworks REIQ member.
Yeah, and I agree with all of that. And the key thing for me, absolutely, is the patience. I think let's give it a chance. Everyone listening, take the time, do your research, and if at the end of the day your decision is to move providers, please just make sure that you're asking those questions.
Yep.
But story number 2 for today, Pete. The property industry confidence falls to its lowest levels since COVID, the biggest national property industry story that we have seen for the week. And some of the key points, the latest Property Council survey has confidence levels at a 92 index points. It's below neutral and reportedly the lowest level since the pandemic lockdown period. The industry is linking the fall to the proposed budget tax reforms, higher construction costs, labour shortages, capital and debt availability. But I think the important point is not just the sentiment. I think the confidence affects whether projects are getting financed, and I have seen that some developers are saying they're not getting approvals through as well. And that, of course, the developers are pausing because of that, and I think investors are pausing too. So do we think that this is the industry just complaining, or do we really think the confidence now is starting to affect the housing supply?
No, it is definitely confidence. Like, I mean, there's no one I'm speaking to that doesn't say it's that. It's only the Treasurer and the Prime Minister saying that it's not there. And that's quite unbelievable to me. Like, the fact that they didn't expect it or didn't see it coming. But, we've sat around prior to an election saying, for the 50th time, I'm going to tell you these things are not happening. We've yanked the rug out from a bunch of people like that, and we've got more stories on this today. We've pulled the rug out from a bunch of people, and now we're sitting there saying, there's plenty of confidence in the industry. That's just not how it works. Like, that's not how life works. If your girlfriend cheats on you, do you go, oh, no, there's nothing to see here. There's no confidence issues. We've got an excellent relationship of trust. I don't think that's the way anyone operates. And so I'm struggling to understand why this is even a conversation. I think it is pretty fair enough for the industry to go, like, this is now a toxic relationship. It really is, where so many things have lined up and changes have been made. Like, you think it can't get worse. Then they do a deal with the Greens and superannuation gets kind of, and now I can't invest using my superannuation account. Like, it's almost like a bad gift that keeps on giving. You keep finding out, and on a later date, there's another problem, and there's another problem, and there's another problem. And if you stack that up, and you're a developer out there, I'd almost be looking for another career. Like and we had so few of them. We had so few builders. We were already at a really chronic shortage, and I don't know what to say, but it definitely is a confidence issue. If you're looking at doing a development, you just want some kind of surety. You're putting all of this money and a large portion of your life time on the line while this gets built at great risk to you. If the plans change, if they decide, like let's say the government decides we've taken so much of a beating on this, one nation has come through the roof, we're on the nose so much, we will reverse it. There's no one here that could actually say that they won't do that. That it's crazy. Like nobody knows what the heck they're going to do because there is no surety in what they say they will do. We can't take that to the bank and trust it. So, I completely get this. I think it's difficult. And I think it ties into the next story as well, where we're seeing Queensland dwellings falling by nearly 9%, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The ABS data showed that in May, approvals for new dwellings fell 8.8%, and the national approvals fell 1.1. So the rate in Queensland, is falling at a significant rate.
Yeah.
So, we're the weakest nationally for total dwelling approvals. And I think, we've got a target here in Queensland to have 1.2 million new homes built. And I'm not sure that how we're going to get there if the approvals are falling lower, right? The competition's under pressure.
We're the second fastest growing. I think we're the second fastest growing behind New South Wales and Sydney, which is always traditionally the first. But 1.2 million homes is the target. I think it comes back to the confidence thing that we were just talking about. Approvals are only just start of the pipeline, but what we're hearing is that dwelling approvals have fallen 9%. So right at a time where the whole idea of the budget was to get investors buying new homes.
Yeah.
They can't buy new homes.
Let's get first home buyers into the market. Let's build houses. But
they can't buy new houses if the houses are not being built, and the houses won't be built if the approvals are not in play. So we're having the approvals falling. We've just come from something saying, the developer's confidence is not a vibe. It's falling as well. Oh, look, it's stacking up to be a perfect storm for the Treasurer and for the Prime Minister and the Labor Party in general.
Oh, yes. Well, I'd like to see if Mr. Albanese will be in Parliament for much longer, or the Prime Minister of our country.
Well, the thing is, he's got another 2 years, doesn't he? He's got another 2 years.
Maybe.
He's hoping that this turns around, right? I think
he's hoping that, but I'm not too sure that it's going to, because it's definitely just going backwards faster. The lies. Have you ever lived in a period?
Have you ever lived in a period where the incumbent Prime Minister, who was rightfully elected to his gig, has been more on the nose than now?
No.
I can't remember one. I remember when John Howard ditched the guns. And I know he was unpopular there. I remember the vitriol. I lived in a regional area where there were guns, and I remember that. There were people angry. I think some people would point back to another Prime Minister I think he was sacked by the Governor General in the end. I can't remember which one it was. I should know that, but that might have been the benchmark. But sitting right here and right now, in my living memory, which is approaching 50 years, I can't remember a less popular Prime Minister than the one that's sitting at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it just comes back to, what we were told, and from the, I guess in their campaigns at the beginning, and why you should re-vote me back in, and this is what we're going to do, to now the position that we're in. everything
Yeah.
has been a lie, really. And I guess, again, it comes back to, you made the point before about self-managed super funds. And so that's kind of leading into our next story, because, again, that was a piece that
Yeah.
wasn't going to change, and it has now changed. And the borrowing ban on that, right? So,
Well, before we move into that, maybe next week we should get a dyed-in-the-wool Labor voter in here to tell us why.
maybe, yeah.
Because, we are only presenting. I really don't want this to be a political forum. Just, if you're listening, we're not saying don't vote Labor. I mean, a lot of the property professionals out there are probably going to be that way inclined after what's happened. But, maybe we should be getting another perspective on it and getting a dyed-in-the-wool Labor voter to come in on here and tell us about the fantastic things, just in case we're missing something, and to not sledge without the chance of representation. I did offer the opportunity to Mr. Albanese and Jim Chalmers to come on board, but they haven't responded to my emails yet.
Yeah. Well, look, yes, my comment before was my own personal view to those listening today.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, and yours and a lot of other people as well. But you raised the SMSF, the self-managed super ban, and there's a disputed 4,000 loan estimate, right?
Yeah.
So talk me through this.
Yeah. So they've come out and announced that there's only 4,000 new SMF borrowing arrangements that can occur each year on average. They've also indicated that industry groups and project marketers, they have indicated that understates the entire role of what a self-managed super fund, or the investors within that play. Developers are then sort of saying, well, that supports them with projects, pre-sale hurdles, construction finance. So it's kind of a bigger play here. It's not just the likes of you and me who look to do that through our self-managed super fund, right? Like, it's not just that play here. I think that maybe us as a whole haven't, I guess, heard about. So, talk me through that, Pete, because you're probably across that a little more.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting question, because it's not like, is it investor privilege, or is it about getting projects out of the ground? And the problem for the government, and the announcement that's come on the back of the Greens trying to get the bill through the Senate, is that it's not as to whether every self-managed super fund buyer should be protected. It's about whether new supply that's coming through the ground should be treated differently from established housing. And that's the real issue. A lot of the developers are saying, we actually had a section of our development that was allotted to self-managed super fund buyers who are now no longer part of the market, because what they need, the type of asset and the returns that they need on that asset, is different from if I was buying in my personal entity. So effectively, what the market is saying at the moment is, like, the government's saying, nothing to see here. There's still another a whole way that you can go about investing in your self-managed super fund. But the industry's actually turned around and gone, the pretty much the largest one, not only have you taken that away, but you've taken that industry away. So, let's say this goes through and it passes, and it hasn't passed yet, but it goes through and it passes. Are developers in the future going to look at self-managed super fund lending to be part of their stock? And they probably won't. That won't be factored in. And even if it's then turned around in 2 years, the damage that has done to the industry in order to gear up and get going, I think that's very, very difficult. And it links back to confidence and approvals. If you remove capital from new housing, what have you got to replace that? What can people invest in that's different in their self-managed super fund? And I'm asking myself that question right now. I disclosed last week that I was about to purchase in my self-managed super fund when the deal was done with the Greens, and obviously that's ended, and behind me there's a mortgage broker who is going to get finance and trails on that, and behind him there is a developer who had a self-managed super fund asset in that he had created, and behind that there is a builder and a bunch of tradies who were building that asset, and behind that there was an architect, there was somebody getting approvals, there was a town planner who had to look at it, and this knock-on effect. And at the end of that, I turn around and go, well, I've got a self-managed super fund, which I'm paying an exorbitant amount for each year to keep. What do I invest in now?
That's a great question. And again, maybe in the next few weeks, we should try to see if we're able to get someone on who could potentially answer that question for us, because I think there's many of us that would like to know the answer to that.
Yeah, good one. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's actually not a bad idea. And then
Yeah.
maybe I can get some clarity as to where I need to sink my soft membership.
Yeah, exactly. How do we spend Pete Schravemade's money? Okay, everyone, that's what we want to know next week on the show.
God help me. God help me if you get involved in that. Jeez.
But I think obviously another big story in our industry that we have been talking about for weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks.
How has this been overshadowed? How is this number 5 on the list today?
It's number 5 on the list. There's obviously bigger things that are coming out that everyone's talking about, right?
It's more drama than Summer Bay at the moment.
Absolutely. But look, it's the biggest operational compliancy change in years for the real estate industry. We all know that as of the 1st of July, real estate professionals were brought into the AML CTF regime for designated services. So right now, property management's not in that, but that's not to say it's going to happen, guys. And we all know this is not just about asking for a driver's license to prove who that person is. There is systems around due diligence, risk, record keeping, staff training, suspicious matter escalation. There's higher risk transactions that are going to require more questions around the sourcing of funds and the source of wealth. But the role of the agent is changing, right? You're not a transactional facilitator anymore, and you need to understand what this crime detection framework actually looks like. And I think it ties back to the Realworks story a little around that compliance risk, and those frameworks that we're choosing. So, do we actually think, Pete, that most agencies have really understood what this change means for them, and were they actually ready for it?
Well, I think the agencies who wanted to be ready and who actually engaged are. And I know that, you were speaking to one last week, completely ready, all their ducks in a row. There's been enough information out there. And as I mentioned last week, I've traveled through 4 major states. They're all talking about it. Every single real estate institute, if you're attached to one of them, has been not backwards in coming forwards in saying, here are your obligations, here are the things to do. So I think if you're switched on and you're active and you're engaging with your peak ethical membership body, you should be in a pretty good position. But there are people who will not have heard anything about this. There are people out there who, like I saw, I think it was only 6 months ago, when I did my real estate course, I did it under an act called the Property and Motor Dealers Act. Do you remember PAMDA? That was what it was
me
called.
too. That's a nice.
Yes. Only 6 months ago, I was handed an appointment act. I can't remember what it was. Called a 32A or whatever that document was. I was handed that by an operational agent to list a property. And
really?
Yeah, and I
Wow.
couldn't quite believe that. I couldn't, for the people who are not in Queensland, the Property and Motor Dealers Act was 2001, I think. We've had a Property Occupations Act since 2014, if I'm not mistaken. So it's been in for 12 years. Somebody handed me an appointment act under the previous act, which is now defunct. It's been replaced with another one. So, there are still some agents out there who will not know a single thing about AML CTF. They won't know what to do. They won't be doing it. And I think, I really feel for those people. I don't know how they operate a business. I don't know how they don't get sued. But, I will say that you're more likely to come across these in far-flung places in the state where it's not as easy for them to get, communication. Although with the interweb being what it is these days, you would think that's not so much of an excuse anymore. But the majority of agents, I think, are going to treat AML like a checklist. Technology is going to solve this for us. We're going to just get a service provider in and we're going to check all the boxes and they're going to do everything. The smarter agencies, the actual operators in the industries, are going to treat this like a new risk framework. And again, I was talking to Peter Lynch from Aon Insurance, and his real message out there. He's about to release a statement with the combined with the REIQ, and Aon's also involved in all of the other states. And I know I was in South Australia, Kane Cook, and was talking about this. And of course, Jacob Kane as well, the REIA and REIV president, was there, and he was saying the same thing. Whatever you do, don't treat it as a checklist. You know, treat it as a new risk framework. And Kane even went one further. He said, look, if you're a professional, I know this is an inconvenience. I know that this new round of legislation and regulation is something that none of us wanted, but it's here now. And he said, if I was still operational today, I would treat this as an opportunity to demonstrate my professionalism to another level. This is why we have to do it. This is why I have to be. This is what distinguishes me from the riffraff out there who don't know what they're doing with it and haven't covered that.
I love that.
You know, yeah. So, and I felt that was a really refreshing way of looking at it. Yeah. Look, I mean, here I am telling a bunch of Queenslanders that they can't get their forms at the moment. So I acknowledge things in the industry are not fine and dandy, and it's easy for me to sit here not operational anymore and say to you guys, oh, you should just be treating it as an opportunity to be more professional. There's a difficulty associated with that, but the agencies that we've met between you and I know we've talked about this. They are definitely treating it like that. This is our opportunity to shine. This is why we're going to be. You know, this is what will set us apart from Joe Blogg's fish and chip store down the road, who are also selling contracts on the side. So, you know, I think that's the way I would approach it. I think everyone that has been engaged should be aware of it and should at least know where they're sitting at the moment.
Yeah, great point. Absolutely loved the sentiment there around how we, need to look at it from that professional standpoint as well. But we're hearing about compliance. We're hearing about so many things changing, and another that has hit the headlines.
Well, I've heard nothing about this in real estate land.
No, nothing in real estate land, but obviously we've seen it through other means, right? But
I know
not in our industry.
Yeah, this one scares me a bit more. Like, actually, I think it should probably be bumped up the list, because we've been hearing about AML-CTF for, 6 months, 12 months now. This one, I haven't heard a single real estate commentator talk about this.
No, it's the ACMA SMS sender ID and spam compliance change.
Tell me what that is, Kasey. ACME? Is that pimples?
I don't know, maybe. Well, maybe. I'm not too sure, actually. But what it is a branded SMS sender ID needs to be registered. So your unregistered branded SMS will appear as unverified. So it's like when we're sending open home reminders, those inspection notices, rent arrears messages, those types of SMSs, the compliance around your sender ID being registered versus unregistered and unverified is what's coming into play as a part of this. So the responsibility may sit with the agency, CRM, or the SMS provider. Like, we're not sure, right? Because we haven't seen much being disclosed about what's required within the real estate landscape. But, if we're not hearing much about it, and I think you and I are across a lot that happens in our industry, I'd suggest that many principals also don't know what this is or what they need to do.
No, exactly. Yeah, and I will add to that, like, it does have implications. So I think I am contacted at least twice a month about an investment property that I have on the Gold Coast. People, and I'll put this in real terms for you guys, there are a lot of you out there using ID for me like a kid in a candy store. You're just going and getting people's details.
Yeah.
I'm on the do not call register. Does that mean that Kasey can't call me? No, she chooses not to. But mostly, Kasey will call me when she needs to, or when she absolutely is desperate. I will get a phone call from Kasey going, "Hey, Pete, what about this?" But I am on the do not call register. There are agents on the Gold Coast who are regularly getting my landlord details from ID for me, and then they're sending me text messages that I don't want to receive, SMSs that I don't want to receive. They come under this act, the ACMA, which is the Communications Register, and SMS Sender ID and Spam Compliance. So what this is saying is that from July 1, if you're going to be sending that to me, you need your number to be registered to start off
Mhm.
with, or you need my consent. And I think the thing that we haven't picked up in this article, and I'm actually looking for it now, is that the penalty for non-compliance has lifted. It's now higher. I'm just actually searching for it now,
Mhm.
and I'll see if I can come up with that before the end of it. But I know that the penalty for failure to do this is much higher. So there are a couple of things. Let's start at the beginning. If
Mhm.
you're sending out notifications to, let's say, a tenant, and you've used SMS to do that in the past, you just have to get that number registered or verified.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
an important thing. That shouldn't be a drama. But I think the bigger one is, what do we do when we are cold outreaching somebody? And I actually don't like cold outreaching by SMS. It wouldn't form practice in any of the agencies that I'm in. But I'm aware that a lot of the agencies out there actually find it really, really useful, especially
Mhm.
people between 18 to 25. That's how they respond. I know Andrew from Flick It Over uses SMS to do these, to get tenant agreements signed in a way that's super efficient and fits in with 18 to 25-year-olds. So there's definitely an avenue there. This is a reasonable medium. But what they're saying here is those laws have changed come July 1st. And I don't think many people in the industry have even looked at it.
No, and look, I think to the point is that there's the key thing here is that who may the responsibility lie on, right? So you've got the likes of Andrew from Flickr. You've also got a product from Cotality called Reader that sends SMSs out. So is it going to be on them as the provider to do it, or is it going to be on you as the agency who actually subscribes to that service to have registered a number?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, I haven't looked into that, but I know that ACMA are out there making examples at the moment. So
Mm-hmm.
Sportsbet's been hit for $3.7 million in penalties.
Wow.
The Commonwealth Bank got $7.5 million for repeated spam breaches. DoorDash got $2 million. The maximum court penalties under the Spam Act are $626,000 per day for a company with no prior record. So that's your minimum. 3.13 million per day for repeat offenders. I
Mm-hmm.
knew they were big. I didn't know how big. So real estate agencies now should be asking vendors, is our branded sender ID registered?
Mm-hmm.
Is it registered? Are our marketing SMS compliant with the Spam Act? Does every SMS include a functioning unsubscribe? That's really important. Have we documented consent, and which systems are sending messages on our behalf? I think they're
Mm-hmm.
the most important ones that I would take to the market in this particular instance. But just as a general method, it might be time to have a chat amongst your office about what your policy is on cold outreach as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't just think on SMS, I do think on calls as well, because I
Mm.
received one in relation to the house that I own and live in, and called them back and uh, said, obviously, no, we're not interested in selling. And I just asked the question of, can I just ask where you got my number from? Because I've actually never dealt with that real estate office at all. And she said, oh, I'm not too sure. We have changed brands. And I said,
I'm
but
not too sure.
regardless,
I've heard that before. We
like,
bought another rent roll.
yeah, it doesn't matter. How did you get my information? Because I've not ever dealt with your business before, regardless of
Well,
whether or not you've changed brands. So can
what
I ask,
consent?
yeah, what consent have you received?
What
And
consent?
and the
Yeah.
response simply just was, oh, I'm not really sure. I could call you back if you really would like to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no need to call me back. Please remove my details from your system. So I think it's, those that are listening today, really, really important that regardless, we're looking at our outreach programs and we're understanding what levels of consent that we've got.
Yeah, I had one on the Gold Coast where I was called by every new staff member for more than 3 years, even though I asked in the first instance. Now, initially they had my consent. This was a former property management business that had changed hands. And so the new person came in and said, oh, have you considered renting with us? And I'm like, yes, I have. I used to do that in the past. I'm not coming
Yeah.
back. I found a really good property manager. Thank you. Please don't call me again and remove my number. So that should
Yeah.
have been dealt with then. But for the next 3 years, every 3 to 6 months, I would get another call. In the end, I actually had a conversation with the principal and I said, hey, mate, you might want to get across this, because if it's not just me and if it's five other people, rather than report it. And that's, by the way, that's not under those phone calls is not governed under that same act. That's a different one. So just for clarity, if you're looking for the act, that won't be under that. That's a specific act governing written communication.
Yeah. So it leads us to one of our next stories in regards to the market mood. And I certainly have seen many articles across the last few weeks that are talking around, buyers becoming more cautious. Obviously, developers are being selective as well. And we're seeing that potentially Brisbane is normalising and kind of balancing out. So I think we've obviously seen some heat come out of particular markets. And last week we spoke about, Sydney and Melbourne, and those kind of prices certainly coming down, but it's not being described as a crash in the market. It's being described as a balancing, normalization around their pricing points, right? So we're seeing Sydney agents are reporting buyers are just taking longer. They're getting fewer bidders. More conditional offers are coming through. We've seen videos through the news around Brisbane agents that are sort of saying things are starting to normalise. There's less FOMO out there. There's more negotiations happening. And developers are also saying that the buyers have just simply disappeared. They're becoming more selective, right? So I think we're seeing probably less urgency, I think. Would you say that our buyers are probably, pulling back, behaving rationally, being a little bit more patient?
Well, let's start with the fact that they're still there. The buyers are still there. So our supply and demand issue has gone nowhere. We haven't miraculously built another, what was it the previous article said, 1.2 million dwellings. They didn't, Jim didn't wave a magic wand and make those things appear. So
bloody hell, Jim, what's wrong with you?
Yeah, the buyers are definitely there. But like you have a think about it for a second. If if your children were ready to purchase, and maybe there is one of them there that is ready to purchase, in your right mind right now, would you tell your child to go looking for houses in this market right now?
Depends where. But I probably would encourage, I would obviously start to say that sometimes there's no good time to go into the market, right? Sometimes it's about taking the risk to get in, but that's me. I'm a bit of a risk taker in that sense. But I would still encourage, understand it. But depends where.
Here, I think it's a good example, because you'd say yes, I would say vehemently no. Not I wouldn't even tell them to look at a particular area at this stage, although Melbourne units are looking very, very cheap at the moment. But there's always opportunity in every market. I do agree with that. But, knowing that my daughter could be looking for a property in the Gold Coast region, there is absolutely no way I would. I wouldn't encourage that. No, I'd be telling her to sit on her hands for the time being. And it's not just about opportunity or is this a great place to buy. It's what I said before. We've just had the rug pulled out from under us. We last election were told one thing, and I think Dave Hughes has summed this up. If any of you are watching the comedian Dave Hughes out there, he's rank, he is ropeable. He's a dyed-in-the-wool Labor supporter who has just lost it. Is the way I would put it. Some of his ranting actually makes me wonder whether somebody needs to do a welfare check on poor Dave Hughes. But he's basically saying that you told us that this would be the way it would go. You even gave our first home buyers, and he's referring to the government, the federal government, you even gave them 5% to get in and buy a house. And now in his state and in other states, those properties have dropped, and those people are holding an asset that they owe more money on than what the asset is worth. So if they bought it at $1 million, they now, it's now worth 900,000 or 950,000. They've lost 50 grand or 100 grand in there. Some of them have lost even more than that. And so you know, from that perspective, you just think about the purchasers that aren't going to purchase at the moment. Do I want to buy an investment property? No, I don't. I don't know, you know, what's going to happen next. I don't know where that's coming from. Am I going to buy in my self-managed super fund? We've already addressed that. Well, I can't. Thank you, Greens.
Yeah.
I can't. Thank you, Labor and Greens. I can't do that now. I can't buy in that self-managed super fund as I had planned meticulously for 6 months. The buyers are still there. They're just not purchasing right now because the confidence has been shot, right? So they're not behaving as though the property is going to disappear if they blink. And that is a key difference because, you know, that's affecting the auction clearance rates.
Oh, definitely.
You turn up to an auction and the people aren't, you know, everyone's probably happier to sit where they are. But make no bones about it, there are still people, like every community forum, there are so many people looking for rentals at the moment, and that's the really sad side of this. I'm seeing every day in my region somebody post, you know, we're a family of 4 with you know, two adults, 2 kids. Just let's say it's that, and we've got a couple of pets. We've got an excellent history dating back 10 years, and we can't find a property. We need to move next week, and I'm seeing so much of that. It's just nuts. So to say that buyers are no longer in the market, it would be an absolute joke. They are there. They're just not behaving like, I'm going to miss this. So
yeah, and they're probably just not behaving like the Labor government thought that they would by them implementing these changes, right? They just thought immediately, all of a sudden, all these buyers are going to have this money to now go and buy homes, and that's not the case whatsoever.
Yeah, it's crazy because like our end goal was to make the property prices drop. They actually said that as part of their budget. They have dropped and people aren't buying.
Yeah.
So you're like, what? Like they've dropped in key areas and still people aren't buying, and they're not buying because there's no certainty, there's no confidence, there's no surety.
Yeah. And look, obviously we've got key markets that are still increasing in value. We've got, you know, obviously the Queensland, Brisbane market in particular, Perth market, Northern Territory. You know, I think even the Adelaide market is certainly still increasing, but not at the levels as to what they were, right? So they have started to drop, but we are still seeing some growth within those marketplaces. But yeah, the buyers are watching. But, you know, if it was me, and I do look every now and again, depending on where it was and the price of the property, I don't know. I might buy.
Yeah. All right. I'd like to see that. We're going to come back. I'm going to fact check you on that in 6 months and see.
Okay.
I'll find you the opportunity. I want to see you purchase.
Sure. No problems. Absolutely. Maybe not as an investment though.
Okay, radio. Yeah. You're going to move into the house next door to me.
Yeah. Oh, that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Well, your husband would think so. Just going to duck over to Pete's. See you tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that actually would be the scary thing because that's exactly what would happen.
You know it.
Where are you? I'm just next door. Are you camping out? Yeah, absolutely. We've had a few too many beers. Yeah.
I would never do that. I would never. That's not in my nature.
Oh, but
shall we go on to this next one? This is an interesting one, only from one, and I'll rush through this because I'm conscious of time.
I think it's probably down your past wheelhouse, right? From a box brownie sense.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It absolutely is. Yeah. So there's a Queensland couple, and I can actually relate to this. So, not from a purchase perspective, but from a renting perspective, I was trying to find houses for Georgia, if you remember, in Melbourne, which is 2 states away. So we've got this article that we've pulled out, which talks about a Queensland couple who are alleging misleading property photos from AI enhanced listings. So the deal is there's a couple dealing with a serious illness, and they're saying misleading photos and property representations wasted exhausting inspection trips. So it's not easy for these guys to actually inspect properties, and they're saying that they had been misled by AI-enhanced images, styling, and edited photos. The published material appears to include allegation and suspicion, and there's no proof that AI was used. Well, AI is used in, I do know this area, AI is used in just about every single image on realestate.com.au. It doesn't really matter which one you're looking at. So whether it's a blue sky replacement, grass replacement, or whatever, there's artificial intelligence used in that. where we start referring to AI is the generative side. What has it added to the listing that is not there? So, in Queensland, in Australia, in fact, we're allowed to edit blue sky out. We just can't put a sky that doesn't exist in that location. And a great example of this is, have you ever wondered what a photographer does when they turn up on twilight and it's a grey, cloudy day, but they've been paid to get a magnificent twilight of the property bathed in glowing golden? Well, they will edit that photo. And it's a commonly accepted practice to edit the photo. Now, good editing will mean that it will look like the sunset that is normally there. That's truthful and honest. And most people don't have a problem with that. Bad editing would be to put a sun in the sky when that is not west, because that misrepresents where west is. Like if there's a setting sun,
yeah, absolutely,
that then becomes west. And so any kind of artificial intelligence in marketing and photography, I think, is broadly accepted. It's except if it misrepresents the property. So if you've got a whole heap of trees out the front that are obscuring the entrance and you take those down without disclosing, somebody would be very annoyed if they turned up to a property and they're all there. However, if you showed them the original photo and said, here's what $150 with a tree lopper could do, and we've got a quote and approval from the council to do it, and you put a little disclaimer down the bottom saying this is what the property could look like, there is nothing wrong with that, because you're not actually setting out to mislead. You're demonstrating the potential of what the property could actually be.
Absolutely.
And we do that every day. Like we do that not that anyone's doing this at the moment because no one's building and no one's developing, but developers do that to show what a property will look like at the end. So, but these people are saying that it caused lengthy trips. Now, I had this happen to me in Melbourne. I wasn't, to be fair, it wasn't the images that were misleading or misrepresenting me. It was the actual agent saying that you have a chance of this property turn up on the weekend, and then I would book a flight to Melbourne. I'd go and book accommodation during the Australian Open. I'd attend 60 open houses and I'd get none of them. And that was the misleading part. But what these people are saying is they've traveled a great distance to get to the property and the property has been misleading. And I think we both agree as an industry whole that the imagery or any kind of marketing, for even the topic, even the way it's written, the content, the copyright that you've written for it should not misrepresent the property as it sits there. I don't really understand why agents would do that anyway, because it just sets up the incoming purchaser or tenant for disappointment.
Yeah, look, well, there's been cases that have gone through tribunal of exactly that, right, where there's been power poles right out the front. They've been removed, from those photos, and they've been fined. The agencies have been fined for that. So, and that's been going on for a little while. I haven't heard of a case like this happening for a little while in the industry, but it's probably because there's been so many other misconduct cases that have been presented to us.
Interestingly, they haven't made a complaint. And that's the problem. Like, that's the problem I've got with this story. It's effectively clickbait at the moment. If you're in that scenario and you feel like you've been misrepresented by an image in that scenario, make a complaint to the Office of Fair Trading. If they agree with you, then there'll be a sanction and the real estate agent will earn but putting it in the media is not going to do anything. Like, it's just a puff piece, then it's not a puff piece. No one likes it, but it effectively becomes clickbait. So, if you're truly misrepresented, then a complaint needs to be made, and there's no evidence that they've made a complaint to the Office of Fair Trading. There's no comment in there to say that that's the case. So, yeah.
Yeah, and probably one of our last topics for today, Pete, I think again is around the misconduct piece, and let's not mention the agent or the agency name from this QCAT decision, but I think it really comes back to the whole consumer protection, trust, and regulatory screening process. But I think the key here is that the QCAT ordered compensation after finding that this particular agent used his status as the real estate salesperson to deceive and manipulate the client. And that was reported. The facts included almost $200,000 was transferred for a supposed investment.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, like I think it's still a criminal matter, right? So I think it's potentially, some of this is
it
still going through the courts.
yeah.
So
Well,
we might need to be
the Q,
careful in how we probably talk
yeah.
through this maybe, but
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
the QCAT finding was that, that the person was actually, he was an undischarged bankrupt. Is that not that's correct?
Yeah, he was
The
undischarged bankrupt with prior
Yeah.
financial issues. So that was already in play, and he's also still been able to operate in the
Yeah.
real estate industry.
Yeah. So he moved from a previous position where he was
Hmm.
an undischarged bankrupt with
Yes.
prior financial issues, and the real question is how the heck did he get a license?
Hmm.
And because he had, I don't know if it was a registration or a license, but it's just another black eye to a real estate industry around trust in real estate. It's how do I trust another professional with a real estate license now that I know that this one was an undischarged bankrupt operating as a real estate agent? And
Hmm.
I think he actually held somebody's money, did he not? I think
Yeah, it
that was
was
the case.
that's
Approximately
what it was.
189,500
Hmm.
invested. Um,
Yes.
QCAT ordered compensation of 271,000,
Hmm.
which is that's a lot of money if you're. I think this person was an elderly person who had placed their trust in not just selling his property but purchasing another one, right?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I think, again, it's just all about how are we operating in this industry, and what checks are we actually doing, from I
Yeah,
guess also a fair trading perspective, and still being allowed this person to continue to operate or operate in a different
yeah.
capacity.
Well,
Um,
that is a very good question, isn't it? I thought from memory. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's been a while since I filled one of these out, but we have to check a box that says,
yes.
have you been in financial strife or whatever? And
Hmm.
this may not be an issue for fair trading. It could be that he fraudulently didn't disclose that, and if that's the case, well, I wouldn't. I don't think I'd like to be. I don't think I'd like to be in that dude's shoes. I don't think they'll take well to that.
Yeah, I think as well some of the questions do slightly change, or the requirements as to whether or not you're just getting your, I guess, registration, or like your
Registration, yeah.
salesperson, property manager certification, versus
Operating the
actually
trust
being the
account.
licensee where you're then
Yeah.
operating the trust account. So there could be some differences there,
Mm,
that this then hasn't been picked up, and
yeah.
then. So, yeah, I guess we can't speculate whilst things are still going through the courts and being finalised. But again, just comes back to this whole trust piece within our industry.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, to wrap this up, it's
Hmm.
a massive day, right? Well,
Absolutely.
there's nine key things there. And like to go back over it, we talked about the form scenario at the start. We've gone through the dwelling approvals falling. We've gone through self-managed super fund. We've spoken about AML CTF laws coming in. We've talked about the ACMA SMS sender ID spam compliance. Talked about Brisbane, selective developers market mood, all in there. And the Queensland couple with the AI agents, and then this other fella
Hmm.
who somehow managed to get a registration or a license and trade as an undischarged bankrupt. Look, not a wonderful day for agents in general, but I think the whole part about this is to have these conversations amongst ourselves
Hmm.
it's one of the reasons we set this podcast up is that
Yeah.
we don't talk about this as an industry enough. We don't talk about the things that we're doing right or wrong. And there are a lot of you out there that are doing fantastic things, not just for yourselves, but for the offices that you're in and for the industry in general. And so it's easy to get to a scenario where, especially on a bad news day, and we've had two of these so far in eight. I think this is our eighth episode.
So, yeah.
We've had two of these, and it doesn't leave me feeling well. But the one thing I would say to the industry is, talking through these matters and actually deciding the way that you will act in these scenarios moving forward makes us better for it. And, like if you're out there today and you're struggling with forms and whatever else, can I just, ask you to exercise a bit of patience, and I think you will see this all play out in the coming weeks. And certainly next week, I'm hoping that we can have somebody on the show to actually discuss the end to the debacle that has been this week and since end of financial year. But look, I also would put a shout out if you're feeling any undue strain, and mental health is a key factor here. Don't forget too that the Rise Initiative has a Rise Care app that entitles you to conversations with people who are able to set your thinking straight, and that doesn't mean patronize or tell you you're doing the wrong thing. It's just a free app that's devised to reset your mental health and really provide that. So if any of these things are happening to you guys out there today, can I just urge you to jump on the Real Care app and seek assistance, or if there's anyone around you that can help you with that, certainly make yourself aware. But look, to all of the rest of you out there, I think I speak on behalf of Kasey, although she will tell you quite frequently that's a dangerous topic. But we wish you the very best leading into the weekend, as far as selling, letting, administrative work, open for inspections, whatever it is you're doing, putting out signage. Be responsible when you're putting out signage. Don't steal someone's AirTag. All of these things that can go on. We wish you the very best for the coming weekend, which is the 4th of July, the 3rd today.
Yeah. Thanks everyone for listening. Have a fantastic weekend. And that's a wrap on Before the Weekend.
Rock on.
Truth, do it right, hold your word, keep it clear, let them know you are here before the weekend. Let it go, come back home, come back slow before the weekend. Be the one they can trust when it counts. Oh, not the noise, not the chase.